Welcome to episode 6 of the Respair podcast. My name's Nick Frendo, and today I'm joined by Miles Baker Clarke. Miles is Strategic Director at Fusion Media, a PR agency specialising in cycling and outdoor pursuits, and he's also founded Cycling Culture Club, where their goal is to create a space where anyone can feel welcome and included regardless of their level of experience, background or colour. They believe that cycling can be a tool for growth, inclusivity and accessibility, and want to share this with the world with the aim of making it easier for people to connect. So join me as I sit down and chat with Miles about all things cycling industry and community and inclusivity. Well, first off, welcome Miles Baker Clarke. How you doing?
Cheers, Nick. Yeah, all right, thank you. Appreciate you having me on.
All good, all good. So I thought what I'd try and do is go through a few topics with you. Just for a bit of background, you're both professionally involved in the cycling industry and you've got your own project as well, the Cycling Culture Club. So do you want to give us a bit of background on both, really? How did you first get into cycling and then the industry?
Yeah, so it's a bit of a funny story, really. You know, you study and you think, you're going to do something in one realm, and you think, that's probably what my life's going to look like broadly. It just didn't really work out that way for me. I ended up sort of flitting between different jobs. I guess one step back, I studied graphic design. So I entered the marketing space through very much like a creative angle. And while I do almost nothing now, apart from all of my own like assets and all that sort of stuff, I still have a very keen interest in design. And I suppose that's the one thing I've held on to. But yeah, so I ended up working for an interior designers. It's a really long story, but it's probably where we first know each other, actually. But so I worked for an interior designers where Nick and I both lived at the time in Tunbridge Wells. Her husband ran a bike shop, a really cool bike shop, sort of concept style. You remember the Vela House, of course, Nick?
Yeah.
Which, yeah, it's a really sad loss for the town when that closed because it was a really interesting space and like one of the first of its kind. And at the time, Ollie, who ran the Vela House at the time, hope he wouldn't mind me saying, but, you know, we're still figuring out the marketing aspect of it. And I sort of came in to help him on the side of that. And that's how I first started to work in that sort of cross cycling professional space. And I've sort of continued for all of my professional career since. So from there, I went on to work for a brand. I worked for Champion System, who make custom clothing.
Didn't know that.
Yeah. I was there 2 years looking after their key accounts and key clubs and stuff like that. And again, sort of crossed that line of creative account management, which is a big part of what I do now, and marketing. And that was super interesting. Plus, obviously, in the cycling space, I guess I started to realize pretty early on that it is possible to work in your passion and sort of make it work. You get from your parents and from your older mates and stuff, and they're like, you know, working is about earning a crust, and you know, if you can tolerate it, then you're doing it right. But I actually learned pretty early on that wasn't on the cards for me. I was like, actually, I could enjoy my work and earn a crust, which is still a great privilege. So anyway, I went from there to work for Rouleur magazine, which is probably the biggest eye-opening move I ever made and will probably ever make, in that business was and still is like super hungry, really small, but producing a really high quality product with, you know, limited resources, right? So you know how this is from your current job and previous, but you end up wearing a lot of hats. You do lots of different things. You do whatever is needed really at the time. So you learn fast, you fail fast, and you pick up stuff quickly. And that's been of great benefit to me forever, really. So yeah, that job was great because it was a little window into lots of different parts, not only of cycling, but also of marketing and design and creative and publishing and production and pretty much every aspect of the marketing sphere that, you know, I now touch.
Yeah.
I first saw as part of that experience at Rouleur. So I'll always hold that really as a valuable time of my life. And I'm very fortunate because very few people get a chance to really like dip their toes in and see, you know, could I enjoy a bit of that? Could I enjoy a bit of that? And all this time I was learning about cycling. You know, I was a rider by this point, but, you know, amateur club rider, reasonably keen, but not terribly educated. I'd put myself in that sort of camp. And therefore working for like the biggest or the most prestigious cycling publication was a big learning curve. I knew nothing about racing. You know, I learned to learn quickly. I knew nothing about the history and the legacy of the sport, none of the cultural idiosyncrasies that, you know, I'm now very aware of, and, you know, we all are. So it was really educational from a number of different aspects. And then fast forward 4 or 5 years, I land myself at Fusion, which for those of you that don't know is a marketing agency dedicated to cycling and outdoor sports and endurance sport. So for me, my trajectory has been in cycling for my entire almost my entire professional career by complete chance, meeting the right people and having the right conversations at the right time. And therefore, I've got this sort of weird blurred line between my personal passion of riding bikes and what I do to earn a living, which is both wonderful. That intersection is something I'm really pleased to have and very fortunate to have, but it's also a double-edged sword because where do you switch off? My
Yeah,
whole
I
life.
mean, this comes up a lot, and I've had it for uh, most of my life as well, where I can't ride with people without them wanting to talk about work. It's like, can we just ride? And you're just surrounded by it the whole time. And sometimes it's really like the stuff that we get to do is great, but sometimes you just I kind of wonder if, like, where I've been ill for the last 3 weeks and I've not touched a bike, it's probably not been a bad thing. So what is your current role at Fusion?
So I'm director of strategy. So for me, what that means is I sit across pretty much all of our clients and help guide client strategy. So basically, in layman's terms, a brand, take yourself, you'll come to us with, actually, we want to achieve X, Y, and Z in this territory. And we'll put together a plan, a strategy, and then we'll roll it out for you in that territory. And my job is not to do the rolling out. I have a great team who do that for me. I just take credit for their work all the time, but is to make sure that we deliver what we say we're going to. So both, making sure that you as a client feel looked after and that you're getting what you wanted and what you set out to do, but also that our team are guided on that sort of day-to-day piece. So it's a really fun role because I work across a huge variety of clients, a huge variety of products, not just cycling, some running, some outdoors as well, and loads of different types of bikes as well, from Van Riesel with you to Brompton on the folding side, or you look at products like Shocks, we do the bow conduction headphones, and everyone needs something very, very different, which for me is perfect because variety is definitely the spice of
Yeah,
my
I guess you
life.
can't just have a blueprint and roll it out across all these different. Now, even within a brand, you've got niche products that don't sit necessarily with each other.
Totally.
A launch for one kind of bike, I assume, isn't going to work for another kind of bike, and strategies aren't going to work the same way either.
Yeah, and working that out and figuring out what that nuance is and how you tackle each problem is the fun bit. If it was all the same, I think I'd be bored because there'd be no challenge, and I really thrive off challenge and being able to take something and go, you know what, I don't know how to solve that, but we'll figure that out.
And where did Cycling Culture Club fit in? How did that sort of
So I guess taking it back a few years now, George Floyd sadly lost his life. The whole world sort of woke up and started taking diversity seriously, sort of. There was all the Black Square movement and all that sort of stuff. And most brands have now moved completely away from it and forgot they ever cared. But some have stuck to it and have continued to do good work in this space. So I guess shortly after that incident, I started to wrestle with my own diversity. So when I first moved down to Kent, where we met, I was the only person of color in our 300 plus member cycling club. Right. So that was my first awakening as and I didn't have the experience at the time to really notice what that meant and how I had to hold myself differently and the sorts of things that I found myself doing or saying or not saying based on that diversity, because I hadn't come to terms with it yet. It took me many, many more years of not only experiencing myself, but talking to other people with shared experience. And one of those conversations was with Justin Williams from Legion. We met in LA and we had not a long conversation, half an hour talking about his journey and, whatever you think of him, whatever he's done and not done in his time, he opened a lot of people's eyes to what was possible and was never apologetic about his diversity and the diversity of those around him, which I really loved and resonated with and still do. And I said to him at the time, I was like, I've got this sort of idea tumbling around the back of my mind that there's an opportunity to connect not only people, but also community, and encourage diversity of all types in cycling. And at the time I felt a bit sort of left out on a limb because I didn't feel like there was anyone, particularly in the UK, bringing these people together. Everyone was doing.
How far back are you going with this?
So this is probably 8. What's that? This is post-pandemic. It's probably 18 months, 2 years ago.
Okay.
So a lot has happened since then, not only in the diversity space and in cycling, but with Cycling Culture Club itself. But I saw there was this opportunity to champion all this amazing work that people are already doing on the ground. There was no need for another community group. There was no need for another group to compete with the many on the ground. What I thought the opportunity was how do we connect those people together? How do we make the voice bigger? How do we make people feel as they're entering the sport that they have a place for them and make it easier for them to find that place? And I felt sort of uniquely positioned to be able to actually do something about it, because I'm in
So you said
marketing.
like I guess a resource, a signpost where, people can connect.
Yeah, totally. So I suppose for all essences, we are a community group, but we sit mostly digital. We do want to move a bit more into the physical space next year, but yeah, we're all about that connection piece. So how do I introduce this person to that person to that brand, this community group to that community group, and actually share the work via our channels, like a media hub, basically, like a magazine, but without all the ties of being an actual media house, no obligations to anyone other than the stories, and being able to really unapologetically tell those human stories was a huge, and still is a huge part of what we do. So our podcast, we do it by there, our website, we do it by there, social, and then we try and bring some of that into the real world so people can actually have that networking piece as well.
I mean, if you had to describe what cycling means to you in one sentence at the moment, what would it be?
Do you mean personally, or?
Yeah.
I'd say it's a reliable form of escape for me. A long time ago, I would have seen, racing results and watts and VO2 maxes and all that sort of stuff as like the be all and end all of cycling. I've long ago left that in the past and happier for it. Like, I ride my bike now to put a smile on my face, to get some air in my lungs, get some freedom in my mind. That's it. Like, if I want to race, I'll race, but generally I'm there for the enjoyment.
I'm hoping this develops over a few episodes, but what I've seen so far is maybe it's the age of the people I've got on, but there's a lot of people in exactly the same space. It is that escapism that it gives them. And a lot of people I've not spoken to, actually tell a lie. No, Jacob was very much data driven and power and what's, but he's a bit younger than the rest of us.
Younger.
So yeah, you can have that one. It's interesting how often that comes up. But what I thought we'll go into next is we're going to jump around a little bit, but I'm hoping by the end of this that everything does connect. So I wanted to talk about the industry at the moment, because I think you're in such a great position to give some insights into what's going on, where it is, and I guess what's happened and got us to where we are. I'd be really interested in knowing what you think the health of the industry is at the moment. For people who don't know, I mean, I'd say the last, in pre-pandemic, if anyone's honest about the industry in 2017, 2018 and 19, it wasn't healthy then. And the pandemic comes along, just like fucks everything. And all of a sudden people are like, oh, maybe it is healthy. But now we're just back to where we were a few years ago. Not that I feel it's difficult. I think where I work, I think I'm in a bit of a bubble. I'm probably not impacted quite as acutely as maybe people at other brands are. It feels like we're relatively new, not exactly a startup, but it's an early part of our journey. So we don't have that baggage of the last few years. So it'd be really, really interesting to know where you think, like, as an industry, where is it?
I think, frankly, it's in a pretty unstable position for a number of reasons, but I can't talk to all of them. I'm not an expert enough in some of those more economic factors. But where I've seen a big issue since the pandemic particularly is this idea, or this lack of ability to adjust the way that cycling markets to its potential consumer. And that's one of the biggest things. So what I mean by that is,
as in brands trying to find the targets.
But generally not doing that, looking at what is the easy low hanging fruit, in inverted commas, really, because it's not easy. It's hugely competitive to go after that same segment that every brand at the performance end is going after, right? So, there's money to be had. There's spending power there, of course, but you're never going to grow the industry like that. It's a zero sum game, whether someone buys a Van Riesel or a Specialized or a Canyon or whatever, the other brand is losing out. So that market's not growing. And if it's not growing, then it has no foundation and it has no ability to weather the storms that we face, like post-pandemic stock glutton. That's all caused by the fact that we're still trying to sell the same bike to the same, let's call it, 100,000 people for easy numbers, instead of actually looking wider. Who are the other groups that we're not speaking to? Can we get more women into cycling? There's a huge opportunity there. Can we get more diverse groups into cycling? There's a huge opportunity there. Can we actually reframe cycling so that it's attractive as a sport or as a leisure activity to more people?
So I heard it might have been. I was looking at the Brixton papers, and I think it was in there. I saw it. They were saying cycling has a perverse addiction with performance, and that creates these issues where not everyone's into performance, not everyone's chasing watts, not everyone like that sort of pro level bike package that everyone is chasing is tiny. Surely that's if you're going after kind of a struggle with the performance aspect that cycling is chasing, I think. And it's it's always done it. It will always do it. Bikes are getting more expensive, and we're seeing the last bike I sold at Via was 20 grand. Like that.
Do you think we're at peak though?
In what respect?
Just thinking about price alone, just in a silo, but I guess I personally feel that we're there.
I don't know. I don't mind, or I don't have an issue with a bike costing 20, 25, whatever it costs. Not an issue for me. I'm not attracted into that realm of things, really. If I could afford a full custom Argonaut, I would. But in 2 years' time, is Tadej Pogacar's bike on the shop floor going to be 20 grand, 25 grand?
I really hope not.
Me too. Is every World Tour bike going to be over £15,000? That's scary. I remember, this is going way back. I remember laughing and joking with some, like, tyres went up to, I think it was like a set of GP 5000s were about £35, and we're laughing about it. Oh, there'll be 100 soon, and 90 quid now for tyres. This is I don't want to go and rant, but this is kind of what the biggest problem is how we're going to bring more people into cycling from whatever background when it's not affordable.
And as long as Tadej Pogacar's bike gets incrementally more expensive every year, there's no incentive or little incentive to bring that price down. Now, I think price is not the only thing. There's plenty of spending power out there, but you've got a sport that isn't growing. It's the least accessible it's ever been from a viewpoint perspective as well. We've lost the ITV Tour de France coverage. TNT is now unaffordable for most general public. So actually, the sport's visibility is the lowest it will ever be next year for some time. So that is going to make it harder to bring people in. So we're going to be more reliant on the community groups, on the people who are in cycling, who are on the cycling clubs, on the people like yourself who run group rides and stuff like that. We're going to be reliant on those people to bring in new people, which is fine. That always works too. But at scale, it's very hard to manage. And I think when people look at a 20 grand bike, they think, I can buy a car for that. But they're right.
I've been working in bike shops most of my life. That would generally make me gag if someone ever said that to me. I'd give a typical Nick Frendo stare or comment. Whereas now, I'm like... Now I'm like, actually, yeah, sure, get a pretty decent one as well. It's mad.
I guess I am starting to see some brands reduce. So like Specialized Athos came out, a couple of months ago or whatever. I think it was actually slightly cheaper than the previous version by, 500 quid or a grand or whatever. And I thought, actually, that's interesting, because if the big S is looking at and going, I think we're getting too much money, then maybe that will help the industry, just check
reset
itself
a little bit.
It doesn't need to be half where it is. I get the cost of everything is harder.
I don't have if it costs, you wouldn't look at an F1 car, for example, and go, oh, that's a ridiculous amount of money.
But you can't buy an F1 car.
Well, there is that. But bikes are now being made for the pros, but obviously they've got to be made available for everyone else. I think that's, we all want to look a certain way. But it is still like those fast bikes are still considered what is cool.
Yeah, and it's part of the zeitgeist, isn't it?
Yeah, that's for me. That's kind of some of the coolest bikes out there for me, and not the aero bikes. It doesn't get my juices going, but it does for an awful lot of people. I just struggle to each their own. Where does with where the industry is at, and what you've just said about communities, how do sort of like content influencers, that's changed a lot in the last couple of years as well, hasn't it? That's probably people are looking to some of the influencers, there's Elliot, Dan Jones, and many, many more. that's kind of where they're getting their information from now. And what if those guys are saying, this is why I love this product, and it's there's some of it that's utter trash, but there's a lot of like genuine stuff in there as well. And I guess that's a far more powerful tool than it would have been considered previously.
I mean, for me, it's just human connection, isn't it? You trust what your mate says for a reason over what you trust what a stranger says. And I think it's the same. Like influencers have built a community of people who feel like they're friends with the influencers, rightly or wrongly. There's obviously challenges in that, and social contracts and stuff make that a little bit challenging. I do it, and I'm an informed buyer who works in the industry and has seen behind the curtain for many, many years. I follow influencers. I think, I wouldn't have looked at it that way. I like the way you're coming about it. And over time, I have been influenced. And whether I bought stuff or not is sort of immaterial. But I thought that's a really good piece of content. And I hope someone who needs to see that sees it so that they might actually be helped by it, right? I think particularly women, obviously not being a woman, I can't speak from direct experience, but a lot of the women I know and ride with, they will much sooner trust an influencer's opinion than a magazine who's written by a male writer. And I think that's not going to change. It's only going to increase.
Yeah, I think I would have thought 2 years ago, maybe even a year ago, that obviously we've got professional relationships with some of these people, but Dan Jones is I find him relatable from what he does, and I'm twice his age, been doing this for an awful long time. I think I know a lot, but every now and then, I'll see somebody he does, I'm like, fair play, like,
yeah.
genuinely.
And for me, with Dan as well, because he's a talented guy. He's got quite a lot to offer on a few different levels. So he's a decent rider. He's got a good opinion, but he's also a creative guy. So he produces really like slick and beautiful content. And for me, that speaks to me because I want to be able to shoot my own content like that. And I've got I like photography and all that sort of stuff. So for me, I'm like, I wonder what Dan's shooting with and filming with. I take that opinion and I think actually I trust what you're saying. And there's others like that too. And I think that is the new age of influencers. We're not just like looking at like selfie queens or whatever. Like the people are actually delivering really polished, really useful content.
And then you realize how hard they're actually working as well. Having seen behind the scenes from some of these guys and girls, there's no way I could replicate that kind of effort. Yeah, it's not just grab it on an iPhone and some
I mean, 5 years ago it will have been right, and I think there's still people who do that and probably do it quite well.
I think when I rode with Francis, which was 2009. He was rolling around with a massive Sony camera on his back, working through the light. I think that opened my eyes the first time, and then I've just seen other people sort of doing putting in a similar sort of effort. It's cool. I like the fact that sometimes I look at stuff from someone who I think my initial reaction would be, oh God, here we go again. And then you actually engage with it and you're like, oh no, you got a point. It's really, really cool. Right. So what's getting your juices going about cycling at the moment? What's exciting?
It's quite a good question for today, actually. Did you see that absolutely mad EF Education like ASOS partnership launch thing? And I watched that this morning, first thing when I woke up, and my initial reaction was, oh God, here we go again. Like, what the hell are they doing? I just sort of looked at it and I thought, my initial gut reaction was, what is this? What has this got to do with this team and a clothing brand? And it's a bit tacky. And then my thoughts sort of steadily evolved. It was like, actually, they put some effort into this. This is actually, high budget production. They're really trying to say something. Not sure what yet. And then it graduated all the way through to the final message, which I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was something like, performance and innovation partner and engine or whatever. And I thought, actually, did I come away with a message that I sort of remember? Yeah. Did I sit by and watch that whole video? Did I look through the comment sections? Yeah. And was it completely different to anything else I'd seen recently? Yeah. So for me, I felt actually by the end of it, after I've been through a bit of a journey, I was like, actually, this is a really cool and exactly what cycling needs, because it does get a bit formulaic. But what's getting my juices going, not loads to be honest, but what I do like is when often like a piece of content or an influencer or someone really challenges me with like a cool creative concept that you just haven't seen in a while, which will often stop me in my tracks, and that will always get me thinking. But the other thing that is just so consistent for me is just human stories. I just live for it. It's the reason why I do a podcast. I love when someone takes the time, spends the money, and puts out the energy to tell someone's rich and
You just
interesting
trashed the
story.
whole podcast now. Thanks for that.
Not at all.
So kind of what I was going to get to, but we'll get on it straight away.
Sorry.
So what role will storytelling and communities play with brands? Can they?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's two pronged, because what could they tell and what will they tell, I think, could be slightly different. I don't think all brands are brave enough to embrace storytelling in the way that they really should, in my opinion. Back
Is
to
there
that
anyone
point
who stands
about,
out with it that you would say? My go-to, probably in the past, maybe not so much now, would have been Rapper.
I mean, they're the OGs again, right? Like they're the ones who started telling stories that were not like product driven, and I love that, and I've always respected them for that. I think there aren't any brands that sort of jump out as being like overwhelmingly consistent, but there's a couple of brands that done it well recently. So Standard, you had the guys on a few weeks ago. They recently told a story of one of my contributors, actually Richard Gregory. He just got his bike, his new Fad Finder, and the piece of content that they produced for that partnership announcement was beautiful, and it was really human and very, because I know the guy, it was like, actually, this is really like genuine, and I loved it. I see a lot of good stuff from SRAM as well. Actually, how do they tell the stories of their communities that they support, all the way through to their athletes, producing crazy results. I think EF education historically have always been pretty good as well, like telling those human stories from inside the peloton in a way that you remember Matt White on what did it used to be called, Green Edge, right? That was some of the best content out there, and I think they're great examples, but I don't think any of those brands are doing that necessarily consistently. What could brands do? I suppose the other side of that question is they can embrace the idea that actually people will be great tools at selling their product as opposed to just marketing.
Do you mean sort of people as opposed to athletes, or including athletes in that as well?
Including athletes, but personal human voices. People are going to resonate that, I think, on a much deeper level than any sort of glossy marketing campaign from any brand, no matter how much money you spend on it.
I still think, I think rappers have, even probably over the last few years, they have done a pretty good job of trying to use athletes to tell stories, whether it's been ultra distance stuff or gravel. I didn't really notice or see if they did much in the mountain bike world, but the product was there.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And having Lachlan Morton, an athlete on EF, but really it was the ultra distance stuff that they were focusing on. And that the storytelling that they got through that for God knows how many years was pretty incredible. I'm not sure. I'm going to just go back on the Asos thing. I'm not sure how I feel about it. It just felt a little copy and paste
from home.
The whole thing. I know it's maybe I'm just being naive and grumpy, but I know the whole signature EF thing is the pink.
Yeah.
But I think I was just hoping for something just a little bit different.
Well, yeah, don't get me wrong. I think the kit is super safe, and I don't think it breaks any boundaries. I was just speaking specifically about that wacky launch video. Do you see that?
Right. It was like a rocket ship.
Yeah. That bit. That was a bit that made me think, this is super weird, but I'm sort of here for it. The kit itself is like neither here nor there, and but yeah, just taking that approach to launch, I think, is potentially a good sign from like a bravery perspective. If someone in a boardroom somewhere said it's a bit of a wacky idea, it's going to cost quite a bit of money, but actually let's do it and see how it resonates.
You can see, like, there's no way they'd do that with like Tudor, for example. You could only really try and pull that off
because I think EF has built this reputation as being a storytelling people first team. People have seen behind the doors of that team for
I wonder whether that came from Rafa, and EF now want to continue it, or whether it was always a Rafa and EF thing.
Do you want my opinion on it? So I think the foundation of it was always there from Green Edge days with Backstage Pass. I think Rafa.
They were. Green Edge was always Green Edge, and it was Garmin Cervelo, then into EF.
Yeah, you're right, because Green Edge is Alula now, isn't it?
Because the Argyle was part of Miller was there as well.
Yeah, Garmin Sharp, wasn't it?
Yeah. So
yeah, you're right.
So the Argyle thing was, God, that's like might even be 2010, something like that.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the wrong team, aren't I? I'm thinking of what is now Jayco Alula.
Yeah. So the Backstage Pass thing, with Matt White. Yeah, that was way ahead of everything. Yeah, because I was working with them at the time doing the hospitality. So that was 2013. Yeah, but yeah,
Anyway,
be
I
interesting.
digress with my mistake, but I think that what they did, what Green Edge did, I think inherently would have inspired what EF started to do. And then I think Rafa just helped EF professionalize it, gave them the money and removed the boundaries to let them do it, right?
Yeah. So still on community, personally and professionally, what does it mean to you? Like beyond, it's part of my job titles, really hard. But what does it mean? What does community mean to you beyond the buzzwords?
I guess for me, it's about belonging ultimately. You know, I've built some of my greatest friends and friendships through cycling and that sort of community aspect. I think it's the single biggest thing that I recommend to people is find a group that you can ride with, find a group that is like-minded, that you can connect with, and they will help you throughout your journey. That's certainly been my experience. I suppose what it means for me personally is where I currently sit in my current, not only professional role, but what I do on the side is it's an opportunity to grow the sport and make it a more welcoming and accessible place. And I truly think community is the gateway to all of that.
Yeah, I mean, I even any group rides I go out on, even when I was, the most rewarding thing I got from guiding was getting someone over a climb that they didn't think they could get over, and I didn't really. I was never impressed by anyone who got up there fast. I was always impressed by the people who like really, really pushed themselves. And if I do a group ride, you'll probably find me definitely won't find me in the fast group because those people are just there to ride fast. But the people who are in the other groups are generally there to socialize and enjoy it. And I find that far more rewarding than, as I say, smashing it along.
I mean, can I throw it back to you? And if that's the format of your podcast, sorry. Community is in your job title. What does it mean to you?
I kind of struggle with it, if I'm being brutally honest. So hopefully Henry will never listen to this. But part of me feels that I think as a bike brand, it's hard to have a community for a start because not everyone's going to go out and spend £3,000 to £10,000 on a bike, so you can't all roll around on the same bike looking similar. So is that a community? When I see what the likes of Rafa do with RCC, how do I feel about communities like that? I kind of, it's difficult for me because I've never really wanted to fit in or be a part of anything. Every time I've dabbled with doing Ascend community stuff, it's been really, it's not within my nature, but I see the value in it. I see what other people get out of it. So when you talk about people wanting connections, social connections or more, I get that, but it's not really me. I do feel like it is a bit of a buzzword that brands use. And being in my job title, I'm like, yeah, I wish I could change that. There is a lot of talk about it. It's just that, how do you do it and be genuine? And what is your reward? If I take 30 people out for a bike ride, buy them a coffee, pastries, and someone learns something about cycling, the bikes, the brand, I'm not there to try and sell everyone on Van Rysel, but it is very good for awareness. And if I'm approachable when I'm on a ride, and that makes it easier for someone to message me on Instagram or talk to me about product, great. But I'm never there to try and sell anything. I've always gone through a real struggle with the word community when on this side of it. And again, when I look at the likes of CGC, that's a community. I'm not sure how I feel about brands trying to create these communities.
I think you touched on something in there that really certainly strikes a chord with me, and that's authenticity. If you're building a community for the buzzword side of it, to try and ultimately sell more product, then it is unlikely, not impossible, unlikely to come off as really authentic. Whereas if you're building it because you believe in the power of community and what that can bring, irrespective of the product side of it, I think that's when it can be really powerful. And I'm struggling to think of off the top of my head like some really good brand examples.
I mean, isn't RCC a good example?
I mean, it is and it isn't. I say it isn't because of the cost of entry. So, your whatever you pay, 150 quid a year or whatever, I think that in itself makes it, for me, too exclusive. That doesn't mean it isn't successful in what it's doing and what it's doing for community, but I do think there's a problem with that from an accessibility perspective. But that's also just my opinion. I think in terms of what RCC does in terms of bringing people together, I think is brilliant and is second to none in cycling.
Yeah, I don't think, others have tried, and you do see like brand-led group rides and everyone's in the same kit. But I don't think, if someone said to me who's new to cycling, how do I find out about groups that I can ride with? Depending where you're based, it's like RCC or someone like Chain Gang. And that would be, you go back, you always probably would have suggested a cycling club, a traditional cycling club. Whereas now I think these groups, communities that have sprung up over the last few years, it's probably a really good place for people to start.
Totally. Which is exactly why I'm doing what I'm doing, is how do you make sure that those community groups are easier to find, and that people can be, it's great if they have a conversation with you and and you can recommend someone, you can send them to Jan or Donna or whatever, then great. But if they don't have if they don't have a me, where does someone go? And I think that's what's been lacking. And the community groups themselves are not great at like being a big voice in themselves and bringing people in, because it's not their job. They're looking after the people who are there, right? Which is ultimately what they need to do. So how do you feed those? How do you make sure people know that there is somewhere for them? That's a less easy problem to solve, but something to work towards.
I guess I kind of want to move into a bit more cycling culture club away from professional. How sort of changes have you seen in the last few years? Has there been progress? What are the current blockers? So, why isn't it growing faster? Why isn't it getting easier for people to join the sport? What would make it?
So I think, has it got better? Yes. I think awareness of the access points and the routes into cycling are better than they were. There are more community groups, and therefore there is more coverage for people all over the world. Like, there's literally thousands and thousands of groups. Now I'm sort of digging into it. But I think there's a couple of issues. I think one, it's often very geographically pinned. So depending on where you are can depend on how diverse your community is. To take London, it's actually really quite good from a diverse perspective. There's lots of community groups. There's a strong density of a huge range of different people, which is great. But you come out to where I am in Tunbridge Wells, and it's still awful.
My experiences are like the London bubble, but then at the weekends, if I ride down to Giro, for example, it's completely different. And that's, it's not far. So every now and then I'm like, oh yeah, things seem to be improving. And then as soon as you step outside, or if I go and do a demo day at one of the cyclist track days or something like that, it still feels like there's a lot of work to do.
It's a huge amount. And if the industry always thinks about it as work as well, so I don't dive back into industry, but the industry always considers it as like one more thing I have to do on my list of things to do, instead of looking at it as an opportunity. Who are the addressable market that you're not currently addressing? Could you turn them into a customer? That is the opportunity that I see. And while Cycling Culture Club is not we're not out to make money, we're quite the opposite. Whenever I am talking to a brand about coming on board to help, support the work that we're doing, like the biggest ROI is actually if we can bring more people into the sport, that there's more people to buy your products. So you asked about, what can people do better? What can brands do better? The first is ask for help. So I think if you don't know how to do something, like you don't know how to hire from a more diverse perspective, you don't know how to introduce more diversity into your brand or photo shoots or whatever, ask somebody who does know. Ask a brand who's done it. Ask an organization like ourselves. Speak to a professional. Ask for help, and you'll be met with great results. And I also try and encourage people to say, just try and do what you can. Don't be afraid to fail. Don't be afraid to try something and it not work. That's a hell of a lot better than sitting on your hands and doing nothing. But I do think categorically the industry has a part to play in not only widening the pool of customers that they're speaking to, but in diversifying cycling. And I mean that from all angles, whether that's race, creed, sex, sexuality, whatever. There's a huge opportunity there. But if the brands don't change the way they're talking to the wider market, then those people don't find a space for them. You look at cycling media, which, I'm not going to slag them off because they do great work, but, those journalists are mostly male. They're mostly white. They're mostly straight. They're core demographic, right? So how they're not telling stories that will resonate with those other people. And therefore those people are not really reading those publications, and you only have to look at any of their media packs to see that. So you have to think of, as a brand, you have to think in a different way. How do I reach those people? And that's where I think community comes into it. If you can authentically connect with communities and allow them to be an extension of your brand in an authentic and meaningful way, then that can be a really, really great place to start. But if that's too big for you as a brand, and I'm not talking to you directly, but if it's too big for you as a brand, maybe just start with, could we do a little bit better in our photo shoots next year? Move the dial a little bit rather than not at all.
Yeah.
And it's the conversation I've had a lot recently, but just try something, do a little bit of something. But yeah, it has changed. It has changed for the better. It's definitely moving in the right direction. Once you start looking, there are some incredible, incredible people and organizations and groups doing brilliant work. So I feel nothing but enthusiasm for what the space could be, but I still think it needs that spark to really ignite, the next phase of growth.
I'd say it only really feels like there's been any shift in women's cycling in the last 3 years, really. There was just nothing, no representation, no visibility. But all of a sudden, wherever you go riding now, not on the same balance, but far from it. But it's certainly a lot better than it used to be. But there's still work to do there as well.
Yeah, and it's multifaceted, right? You can look at things like Zwift and the Tour de France Femme. It has been a great catalyst at getting certain people interested in the sport. But then you've got that whole influencer topic, which I think is key, which has been great at bringing in new women into the sport at a sort of more grassroots or mid-level space. And then where I think there's a real opportunity is, and this is not a problem that neither you nor I nor anyone in our contemporary space could solve, but cycling is still seen as a male-dominated sport from a very young age. So when you're thinking about like school and education, and you only have to look at like the gender splits between those taking part in cycling proficiency, for instance, it's still off. At that age, it should be 50-50, but it isn't. And then you start tracking up as well, and you get to the point where you're sort of, I can't remember what the exact cutoff is, but maybe 14 or 15 for girls. Cycling becomes quite a difficult sport for them to do at that age for a multitude of reasons, not least because of societal pressure and puberty and everything else going on. But it means that a lot of women and girls fall off cycling then. And then it's up to somebody in the industry to try and recapture them at a later stage, if you can, if it's not too late, or when they get injured from running.
Yeah. So I could go for hours, but I think we're going to start to close off now. What gives you hope going forward?
I think there's a huge amount of curiosity from riders, from the industry, from my contemporaries. I really think we're on the precipice of change. I think people are starting to slowly wake up and consider things differently, what their futures are as brands, or how me as a rider, how can I personally be better to help bring someone along on the journey? How can I, leave my bias and my prejudice at the door and just try and be better? Because as much as I sit up here on my high horse talking about diversifying cycling, I've still got my biases that I will subconsciously have to tackle when I meet someone who's on a mountain bike on a club ride or whatever. And I just think, actually, they're out on a club ride. They're here. They're gonna, they may not have a traditional path, but they're here. How do we nurture them? How do we make sure that they come back next week? And I think we're all starting to be slightly more aware of that. So that gives me a lot of hope. And then I think just lastly on the hope piece is, I think brands are starting to wake up and smell the coffee. They're starting to see that they can't keep doing the same things. And I know that because our clients are coming to us and saying, how can we be different? How can we do things differently? How do we push this envelope in this direction? So that gives me a lot of hope, for sure.
What's next for Cycling Culture Club?
Quite a lot, actually. Probably too much to go through here, but I really, as I said earlier, I really want to bring more of our experience into the real world, more ride outs, more meetups, give people an opportunity to network, try and do that globally as well, not just here in the UK. I'm biased because I live here, but try and get our other community leaders and contributors to do the same wherever they are. I'm also building this community finder, which is been really rewarding, which is actually giving a tool to people so they can go on and find someone to ride with. Sadly, it's a bit of a manual process at the moment, but it is growing sort of steadily. The idea being that hopefully in a few months or a year's time, someone could jump on wherever they are in the world and say, I want to ride with these filters, and it spit out a bunch of options and places where you can go to find people to ride with. That would be a real passion win of mine.
What's the one message you want the industry to hear? I think you probably just said it.
Probably said it. Just do things differently. Done the same things, the same way for generations, and the bike industry hasn't learned. We don't learn from our mistakes. We do the same things time and time again. So just learn a bit. Let's just do things a bit differently.
If it truly fulfilled its potential, what would that be?
I mean, imagine a world where cycling is accepted into societal norm in the same way that other sports are. Imagine what that could mean for growth and for a huge number of other things like health and societal mobility and the mechanisms of our cities and et cetera, not just thinking from a sport and selfish road cycling, gravel cyclist mindset, but also like what could the wider adoption of cycling or the bicycle as a tool actually mean for our world. That could be huge.
A good answer. What's the one belief about cycling that you think is wrong?
Probably that riding an expensive bike makes you a better rider.
Yeah, I think
I'm so there on that. I mean, I ride an S-Works because I'm lucky, and I bought it when I was in the industry, but I'm so freaking slow. I'm so slow, and I regularly rock up to a ride, and someone absolutely trounces me on something, a quarter of the value or whatever, and it just reminds me and humbles me every time that it doesn't really matter what you ride. Just get out there and ride your bike and find enjoyment in it in whichever way you can. And in the same vein, I've stopped looking over my shoulder at my mates who are quicker than me and on nicer bikes than me or whatever. Like it just doesn't matter.
Yeah, I got absolutely humbled a couple of weeks ago. I'd like to say I enjoyed it, but my ego to take a bit of a kicking.
You're ill, it's fine, you're ill.
Yeah, I'm not sure I would use that excuse. One of us has been training every day and one of us has not. I'll use that one. But yeah, it was good thanks for coming on. It was really good to chat. Thanks for input. If there's so anyone who listens to this, I'll put some links into the website, especially if there are anyone who is looking for a community to join or has a community that could be hosted on your website, I guess is what we're trying to.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah. So get in touch with Miles. I'll put some links up, or drop me a message and I'll hook you all up.
Nice one, Nick. Appreciate the space. It's always good to chat. And I don't think we chatted for an hour and we haven't talked about work almost at all. So happy days.
No, it did. I've got a message to send you afterwards, but there we go. All right, mate. Well, thanks for that. Take care, and I will no doubt catch up with you soon.
Yeah, catch you on the other side. Take
Cheers,
it easy, mate.